morning or afternoon for our friends overseas. Thank you for joining us for this 18th edition of our Networking Leaders, Legends, Luminaries, and Visionaries fireside chat series. As always, I hope this finds all of you and your loved ones safe and sound. And for those of you of the Jewish faith in the audience, Lashana Tova, wishing you a most happy and healthy New Year. It's my pleasure to be joined this morning by my friend Amir Khan and a special guest, his brother Atif Khan. Amir and Atif are the co-founders of Alkira, a private company focused on addressing the era of cloud networking. Amir is Alkira's CEO, Atif is its CTO. Prior to launching Alkira in May 2018, Amir was co-founder and CEO of Vitella, where Atif was the VP Technology and Solutions, and they are backed by blue-chip investors, most notably venture capital firm Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, and GV, formerly known as Google Ventures. I was in the audience at one of the first Open Network Users Group conferences in 2014 when Amir made a presentation on his then company, Vitella's initial deployment with a gap of this thing that we all now know as SD-WAN, one of the most exciting product markets in networking today. At the time, I believe the rubric SD-WAN had not yet been coined, but he and Vitella clearly were the pioneers of what, again, has become one of the most exciting, fastest growth product opportunities in networking. Before Vitella, Amir held leadership roles at Cisco, Juniper, and Nortel. Following the Vitella acquisition, Atif was Senior Director of the Enterprise Networking Business at Cisco, and prior to Vitella, he held senior positions at Alcatel, Huawei, and Juniper Networks. So between the two of them, not only did they found a private company that pioneered an exciting product market, one of the fastest growth and perhaps the fastest growth market in networking, but they also have extensive leadership experience with clearly some of the most prominent companies in networking, spanning Cisco, Juniper, and Huawei. Now for the questions. Again, you both have worked for a number of the largest and leading networking equipment companies. And in Vitella, you founded a company that pioneered a new product market with apparently a better networking approach. And now you've identified another market opportunity or bringing to market another seemingly differentiated market approach. Before I ask you about Alkira specifically, I want to discuss the health and direction of the overall networking industry. And I want to start with the basic question, is networking dead? Because many investors remain concerned that networking is being or is at risk of being commoditized. That said, that concern has been around since at least 2012 with the big megabits in SDN and NFV. Margin structure for most companies has actually increased since then, although growth has been less than robust for a number of companies. What is your take on the health of the overall industry?
Paul, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Having been in the industry for over 30 years, both Atif and myself, this question comes up on and off. And our answer is that networking is not dead. Networking is so fundamental to the industry's growth that it ties everything together, whether it's new clouds or the existing infrastructure. So it's certainly by no means dead. Now, having said that, the networking needs to be reinvented for the cloud era. And if we don't do that as vendors, as service providers, then that's going to be a challenge for us because the dollars are going to shift to newer offerings versus the older type of offerings. And that's what our view is on the industry.
So, Amir, let's talk about reinvention. Where does networking come from? Where is it today? And where is it going? And where does it need to go? Where are the greatest opportunities and challenges for the networking industry? What are the remaining frontiers that remain to be addressed and conquered? And I assume that ties in. My next question is going to be about Alkira in terms of the frontier that you're conquering with Alkira. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And, let's take a step back and look at the history as to how we have evolved in the networking industry. Right. If you look at, I'll divide it up into a couple of pieces, the enterprise market and the service provider market. From the service provider market, remember when we used to have the lease lines or technologies like X.25, and then we went to MPLS and frame relay ATM, first to frame relay and ATM and then to MPLS. So the technologies continue to evolve, and even today, for private connectivity, MPLS is the predominant technology. People realized that internet was coming into the mix and was fast enough, was inexpensive, so why don't we try to secure it alongside MPLS and offer private connectivity over both MPLS as well as internet and wireless technologies, right? And that was the inception of I would say Viptela, where a common fabric was created across all types of underlying transport for the wide area networks to interconnect branches and then seamlessly connect those branches to the existing infrastructure inside your data centers and branches. If you look at the enterprise market, people were deploying their own data centers. For many, many years, they have been deploying their own data centers. And local area networks and wireless capabilities were limited to inside the campuses. Now, those technologies have also evolved, and one common theme is that the control plane resides in the cloud now. So SDN, if you look at the software-defined technologies, it was initiated from the local area side, very quickly realizing that it could provide benefits to much beyond the local area networks. So we invented the Viptela solution, which addressed the wide area networking. Now, having said that, with the invention of the cloud, whether it's private or public, comes the ability to completely virtualize the networking environment. So the way I like to divide it is whether it's the enterprise or the service providers, you will have the control plane, not only the control plane residing in the cloud, but the data plane will have to be virtualized as well, whether it's the private cloud or the public cloud. And so if the companies do not adapt to the new requirements from the customers to offer new solutions, which need to be agile, which need to be very horizontally scalable, and which need to be elastic on demand. So services performance or requirements need to go up and down based on, as the needs of the enterprises arise. Then you will be probably left behind. And we haven't seen that kind of agility, elasticity, and horizontal scale and availability in the networking industry. You have to physically deploy the solution and build whatever you could yourself manually, customized to each environment. And that's the opportunity to bring a solution which is completely as a service on demand and which hides all the complexity from all those, perspectives, right? Whether it's the agility or high availability or, whatnot. It needs to offer all those pieces of the solution and needs to integrate it together. And at the same time, create an environment you have better security and better availability of higher layer services like firewalls, address manageability, and load balancing, etc. So think of it as, we have the car industry and now we have to invent Tesla, right? So, so where do we take this industry? And starting from the cloud, we are very excited to say that, the demand is so much that the customers are asking us to, start offering similar abilities beyond the cloud and get into other areas in the network. So for the first time in the networking industry's history, we have an offering which is completely as a service and on demand, and we are very excited to say that the opportunity is just enormous.
So, Amir, what you just identified is the fact that networking has always been and continues to be complex, and the larger the network, the greater the complexity, whether it be a service provider like a Verizon, a British Telecom, a cloud operator like a Facebook or Google, or a large enterprise like a JP Morgan or a Pfizer. Networks have to scale obviously horizontally, not just vertically. And it's one of the challenges we've seen, I think, since the inception of Nicira and the VMware acquisition back in 2012, and also for NVIDIA for that matter, that when you disaggregate the control plane from the data plane, that horizontal scaling, that requirement, that need for horizontal scaling is quite the challenge, and I think it explains why Google and Amazon still dominate STM deployments. Well north of 90, I think 95+% of STM today is actually Amazon and Google. And then you and Atif came around with Tela, and ironically, the focus was software-defined, but for wide area. It wasn't a intra-data center solution, it was an SD-WAN solution. And that brings us to Alkira and what you just described generally. But I want to give you the opportunity to more specifically describe what Alkira is doing, what it's addressing. What is Alkira's solution? What are the use cases that you address before I ask you some additional specific questions about Alkira?
Yeah, it's a very broad question, Paul, so bear with me as myself and Atif try to explain it to you. We'll try to be as precise as possible. So if you look at historically what our focus was on providing hardware-based offerings and through software controlling those offerings, right? In case of the cloud, you do not have the opportunity to deploy hardware anywhere. You only have the opportunity to deploy software on the cloud infrastructure. Now, the way the cloud started, they did a wonderful job on providing the ability to run compute and storage applications, databases in the cloud. But from the networking perspective, if you look at each one of these clouds, the constructs are different, the capabilities are different, the limitations are different, and the poor customer ends up stitching everything together themselves, even in a single cloud, and they struggle for months and years to plan out deployment in a single cloud. So we saw that opportunity after talking to customers and service providers who were struggling with a single cloud, and once we started looking into multiple clouds, it became very apparent that each cloud was built differently, and specifically from computer networking perspective, it was so different that customers were struggling to adopt a multi-cloud environment, right? And so there was certainly a need for a solution which was ubiquitous and common across all clouds, not only from the computer networking perspective, but even the higher layer services like firewalls and how they were deployed, what pieces were deployed, and how they were interconnected was very, very different as well. Right. So what we have come up with is a completely virtualized environment, which is as a service and on demand, where you can deploy the connectivity pieces, bring all these clouds together in literally minutes, and start deploying the higher layer services, which are 100% fully integrated into that solution. And this is what we call the mini data centers or virtual co-locations, which you can deploy anywhere there's a cloud region present, right, across the globe. And you can design it in minutes or, sketch it out in minutes. Literally, you draw it out on our canvas after coming to our portal, and then you drag and drop the high layer services, and we do the difficult job of stitching everything together in a very clear and concise manner across the globe, and you click on provision and things magically happen. And our customers are so blown away by, the ability that we bring to the table. We're in production and multiple customers now. And, not only that, but imagine the analytics, the governance, the day-to operations across all these clouds. How many tools are you going to use which are customized for each cloud? And that's the challenge, right? And why multi-cloud? Because customers could run into those issues very, very quickly. I'll give you a few examples. Like Microsoft applications run better in Azure, and they're much less expensive. And the customers are struggling. They started off from AWS. Now, how do I migrate my applications into Azure? Or, your company may mandate for you to move into a new cloud because of whatever political reasons, right? All of a sudden, the IT team is struggling with how do we adopt a new cloud now, right? It could be mergers and acquisitions, right? Some company may acquire another company who's sitting in a different cloud. Now you have to build an infrastructure from the networking perspective which is not meeting the requirements, and all these environments are being run independently, which is very, very costly for the customers. So these are just a few examples. There are many other reasons because of which the customers want to run a hybrid multi-cloud environment. So that's why we came up with Alkira, which completely streamlines the deployment across all clouds and hybrid environments. Right? It's one way of offering not only connectivity, but also higher layer services, and one way of doing analytics, governance, data operations across all clouds. You literally do not even have to understand how the underlying clouds work. Now, you can imagine, because this is a completely virtualized infrastructure, it stretches much beyond the boundaries of the cloud in the future. Because it's a global service, customers have been asking, once they deployed our initial multi-cloud solution, they started asking us that why can't I expand it beyond the cloud into my existing environments and solve some of the other problems in a similar way as a service on demand. So we are very excited to say that we are starting to delve into expanding the solution deeper into the enterprises now as of this month, and we'll be offering a lot of services which take you deeper into the enterprise networks, and it's a huge opportunity not only for the cloud but also in the existing infrastructure. I would like to ask Atif if he would like to add anything to this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're seeing, Paul. So basically, going forward, what enterprises, for them, the most important thing is the agility, and being able to extend your network, not just from the connectivity perspective, but also from security, visibility, governance, and day-to operations perspective as well, to anywhere in the world, any location in the world, to be able to connect to any cloud, any on-prem location, in a very elastic and on-demand fashion. And that's only possible if you have a software driven platform, which basically allows you to virtualize as many functions as possible and automate as many functions as possible. And for the cloud era, basically the cloud or the network which is cloud native is very important. When I say cloud native, basically what I mean is that a network which is built in the cloud to accommodate the needs of the workloads which are running in the cloud, which happen to be very different from those workloads which are running in traditional physical networks. So all in all, Amir has described a lot as far as the direction and what we are doing. So that's exactly what we see.
All right. Before I ask you any further questions, I just want to summarize and make sure that I understand. So I think what you just described is providing customers with agility, ease, and speed of provisioning and lower costs in doing so, which has been the nirvana of networking for quite some time. But it raises the question, if I have that right, what does a customer need to have in terms of underlying hardware, software? You are a cloud-based solution. You don't provide software. You don't provide hardware. What does a customer need to have is your ability to provide the solution dependent upon industry standard APIs? What happens if the underlying hardware, if those APIs are proprietary? What, in layman's terms, what underlies the magic?
Yeah. So fortunately, Paul, in the networking industry, we have standardized things over the last 30, 40 years. And we are at the point where, in general, if you just purely talk about product offerings, we are pretty well set from the standardization perspective. Right. So when we build our infrastructure in the cloud, which is completely elastic, we have to obviously tie it into the on-prem locations, so the on-prem locations can consume the cloud seamlessly. And for that interaction, we use standards-based mechanisms like IPsec or SD-WAN or protocols like BGP, which interact with your existing environments seamlessly. So yeah, absolutely. Without that, you would not have end-to-end connectivity, right? And that's how we have built the solution. But our piece is purely as a service, as you said, on demand. So what that means is that you can consume the Alkira piece just like any other higher layer application like Salesforce. You just come into our portal, you register, and you start consuming the network. And that's how flexible we have built it, and that's all possible because we have access to all the cloud technologies. And Atif, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so Paul, basically, it's a purpose-built software-led platform, which has been designed from ground up to take advantage of all the things which are available to us from the cloud perspective. When I say what's available to us, meaning that if you look at the networking concepts of the CSPs like AWS or Azure, so we take benefit of or we take advantage of those capabilities, and then our software platform, which is built on top, virtualizes everything end to end for the customer, virtualizes all the functions as far as the services are concerned, connectivity is concerned, visibility is concerned, governance is concerned, and then we also automate any function which requires automation.
All right, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but this just went GA only recently. Who is the target customer audience? Is it all enterprises? Is it primarily large enterprises? And again, I recognize you're still very young. You've only recently gone generally available. What are customers doing, and what have they been doing to date prior to Alkira, presumably offering them a better solution? And what types of customers are expressing the most interest?
Yeah, so that's, let me try to answer it as precisely as possible. So when we sell a solution, whether we are an equipment manufacturer or a service provider, our primary goal is to provide services to the end customer. And that's why, we always end up focusing on the end customer, which in our case is the global 2,000 type companies, and the way we want to extend beyond that or even to that, large customer base is through our partners like service providers and SIs, even telecom agents, right? So that we have the capability to scale from the largest to the mid-size, small, medium-sized businesses. So the customer base is certainly any customer who is moving into the cloud and is struggling with the cloud infrastructure from computer networking perspective. They come to us, and I'll give you an example of a large customer who took almost a year and a half or 2 years to perfect their AWS deployment, and they did it themselves. Right, and they were starting to struggle because requirements were popping up not only from the single cloud perspective, which were very difficult to scale to. They were also looking at the multi-cloud deployments going forward. So they came to us and they said, "We want to try out your solution," and they're in production now. They started off with the very simple directory services in the cloud. And then they had a requirement to put desktop services in Azure, so they literally brought that up within a day. We were on a call with their management discussing how simple it was going to be to expand into a second cloud. So their architect told upper management in their briefing that without Alkira, they would have done 6 months to a year of planning before they brought in Azure into the infrastructure. And with Alkira, he said, I confidently told the business unit that I can get it done in a day, and literally that's what happened. They got it done in a day. So now they are in multi-cloud environment. And then they have some employees who are located in Asia, and they were having performance issues. MPLS is very expensive, and bring all the cloud traffic across the globe into the cloud environments here versus writing a cloud backbone to consume cloud applications was much cheaper, and they didn't have a very quick way of doing that. So we spun up our cloud exchange point in Asia within a couple of days, and the next week they were up and running. All of their employees, which are close to 1,000 in Asia, and they are coming across the cloud backbone to consume the cloud services, right, at a very high performance, low latency kind of an infrastructure. So that's how quick it is, and once you land this opportunity, expansion is just amazingly quick because customers start to realize how simple it is and how highly available and elastic this infrastructure is. They start to deploy more services, and now they're adopting the solution across the globe. It's an international company, so they're adopting our solution across the globe over the next few months. So that gives you one example. Atif, anything to add?
No, I think you covered everything here.
Okay. No doubt your demonstrated vision and success of Intel has helped, but how are you going to market and priming the market, or is the market already primed?
The market is pretty much primed, Paul. People are deploying the solutions on their own, and that's where they're struggling. They have multiple ways of deploying the solution. One is through the co-location facilities where they have to spend a lot of money up front and build their hardware infrastructure and some software pieces, but all that allows you to do is have a connection into the cloud or multiple clouds. But it doesn't go deeper into the cloud, and that's where you struggle with the policy, intent-based policies and visibility and control over your cloud infrastructure. Right, and the second way of doing things is do it yourself in the clouds, right? And there you have to individually deploy elements across all different clouds. So let's say you want to secure an infrastructure, you have to do it differently for each one of the clouds. You want to have address manageability for the clouds, you have to do it differently for each one of the clouds. So all the applications are deployed on one-off basis mostly. And that's where the customers struggle, and thereby the need for a solution like ours, where you do not even have to think about how the underlying infrastructure works. You can just start expanding into different environments in one way, and this is the way that you have been used to doing networking over the last many years. But what we have done is automated the whole infrastructure, and you don't have to worry about availability or elasticity or any of those capabilities, and you get full governance capability across these multiple clouds.
So Amir, I know that you've answered this question in part throughout our discussion over the last half hour, but I've got to ask you, the problem has been recognized by quite a number of vendors. Again, it's one of the most exciting opportunities in networking. And it seems like virtually every vendor has and or is working on cloud networking solutions of one stripe or another that are addressing one or more of the use cases that Alkira is addressing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but these include other startups like Aviatrix and a number of established large public networking security and cloud companies. And to name just a few, we could talk about NSX Cloud from VMware, Secure Agile Exchange from Cisco, an Aviatrix Cloud Network Platform. Who do you view as your closest competition among both public and private companies? Who are the primary competitors? And how does Alkira's solution differ? I think you've already identified the fact that it's cloud-based SaaS. But what are the key competitive differentiating aspects of what you and Atif are doing vis-a-vis the numerous other, and most of whom are far larger with far greater resources?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's obviously a very important question. and it comes up often, and I'll take the first few minutes, and then I'll let Atif describe the details. So essentially, if you look at the current landscape, pretty much everybody is our competitor. At the same time, none of them are our competitors, because there's no comprehensive end-to-end solution in the industry, and we are very proud to say that we are the first one to come up with a comprehensive end-to-end solution, and we are leading the way. So let me categorize the competitors into different areas. If you take Cisco's of the world, right, they are taking their existing solutions, whether it's VMware or Cisco, they're trying to mold them into, expanding their solution into the cloud. And it's not about, creating a pure overlay through your SD-WAN type solutions into the cloud. That also brings you pretty much to the edge of the cloud and provides you with capabilities to tunnel into the cloud to a certain extent. But it's not a cloud native solution by any means, and does not meet the requirements of doing things in a ubiquitous manner across the clouds with comprehensive visibility and governance and policy across all these clouds, which is required by the customers. And then you have orchestration players like Aviatrix, which I like to say are purely like the network management solutions used to be. Right. Remember those days when Cisco and Juniper and the likes of the equipment vendors were offering their switching and routing solutions, and you had network management solutions from a third entity. So orchestration players are very similar to that, where they try to simplify the underlying infrastructure across multiple clouds, but you still have to understand the nitty-gritty details of each one of the cloud providers. And then on top of that, they have a little bit of, capabilities to install some nodes, which also is a problem from the customer's perspective. If you have 10,000 VPCs, you're going to deploy 10,000 nodes in those VPCs to manage their solution. So it becomes very quickly a realization on customers' part that that's probably not the right way of doing things. It may help them to a certain point, but it doesn't take them beyond that. And then you have the mid-mile players and the last-mile players, right, or the co-location facilities. There also you have to, stitch things completely together. So in case of, let's say, an Equinix, you come to their facility, you deploy your hardware infrastructure. There's some software constructs available to stretch the connectivity in an automated manner into each cloud. And then on top of that, you may have players like Megaport or Packet Fabric and whatnot, who provide layer 2 capabilities to stretch or offer connectivity as a service from the layer 2 perspective, and very minimal layer 3 capabilities, similar to deploying your own routers in the colo facilities or in the clouds, and interconnecting all of that stuff together in a very manual manner, right? So, and then there are other players who are starting to come into the play as well. Let's take a look at the individual cloud providers. They have no reason to go multi-cloud because they want to attract traffic into their own infrastructure. So they may automate their own infrastructure, but not across multiple clouds. So that's the landscape from the competitive perspective. Where we come in is a very comprehensive end-to-end solution, as I said. We're the only ones which offers fully redundant, highly available, multi-AZ, multi-region, fully routed and segmented solution with analytics, governance, day 2 operations, and also overlaid policy, intent-based policy, which is also offers micro-segmentation, etc., in an end-to-end manner to the customer. And if you may, there is a blog written by William Collins about the Alkira solution. He's an architect at one of the largest healthcare providers, and you can read that blog and see how excited William is about deploying our solution. And there's also a podcast in Packet Pushers, heavy reading, which was done by Matt Hogue from Coke and one of the other customers, and William is in that one as well. So you may want to listen to that podcast as well, and see the excitement that they have about the Alkira solution. And these are some of the largest companies who are deploying our solution. Atif, anything to add to that?
Already there. Already did. Already read the blog and listened to the podcast. But I highly recommend it to those in the audience who are interested in this topic, and I assume if you're listening to this call, you're interested in the topic. Let me take a step back. Well, you know what? I'll stay on the theme of competition, and I got to play devil's advocate, my friend. You and I founded, correct me if I'm wrong, in May of 2018. So in roughly 2 years, you've come to market with what you described as this revolutionary, unique, groundbreaking solution. And the obvious thought is, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still well less than 100 employees, and I know you've got a very talented team that you've assembled that you and Atif are leading. But nonetheless, you've got well less than 100 employees. Roughly 2 years to come to market. What's the depth of the moats and the heights of the walls? Why can't this be relatively easily replicated by other organizations, especially the VMwares and Cisco's and, if not, the cloud guys themselves? How difficult is this for them to do? You've done it in 2 years. Why can't they?
Yeah, so, as you know, when we came out with Viptela, there are a lot of solutions that existed in the wide area networking space also, and a similar question came up. And I think the challenge lies in the size, the bureaucracy, the number of hoops that you have to jump over to build a solution like this. Because what you need is a clean sheet of paper and step back, and you have to be able to cannibalize your existing offerings. And that becomes very challenging for large companies. And so what ends up happening is that they end up taking a piecemeal approach to, extending their existing solutions to accommodate the new environments. And that's exactly what's going on today, right? So you are starting to see a lot of noise in the market, which is validation of what Alkira is doing, but there's no end-to-end comprehensive solution from that perspective. And also, the reason we are able to do it in 2 years is because of the pedigree of the team and the history of understanding the networking industry from both the enterprise and service provider perspective. We have delivered solutions in a lifetime in both those industries, and you'll find very few teams out there who have the experience in supporting, deploying the largest networks in the world, working with the service providers since inception of the service providers in the internet networking industry, and having come out with the solutions which cater to the needs of the customers in different, I would say, niches in the networking industry. And also in working so closely and having the connections in the enterprise and the service provider space where customers trust you. That trust takes years to build. And as you know, Paul, the networking technology is not that simple, and it's very, very mission critical. So you have to, if you're going with a startup, you better have a very thorough, understanding of what the team brings to the table and the credibility of the team and the integrity of the team in providing solutions. So we take pride in that. We have built the solutions all our lives in the networking industry, and that's why we are able to differentiate ourselves. That knowledge of 30, 35 years, and with the nimbleness or the agility to learn new technologies and adapt ourselves. There are very few teams. Majority of by the way, our colleagues are retired now. We continue to innovate in the industry, and we are so excited about it still. So I think those are some of the elements that set us apart in the industry, and that's why we are able to come up with such comprehensive solutions in such a short time. I think it's not an easy task, and I think you would agree with that.
So I will observe that in my 25, 26 years covering the sector, almost without fail, virtually every product market, application delivery control, and optimization control, session border control. We could go on and on and on, almost without exception. I have to think long and hard to find the exception. Those markets, product markets, have been pioneered by anywhere from 2 to as many as a dozen private companies. Without fail, 1 or 2 of them will have better vision, strategic vision. 1 or 2 of them will have better tactical execution. And those 1 or 2 will have gone public or will have gotten acquired for a boatload of money, and then that'll be followed by a couple other acquisitions, and most of the others will fail. But to your point, almost without exception, perhaps without exception, it tends to be private companies that lead the charge, and perhaps the message is capitalism works. That said, again, I want to play devil's advocate. So, it's been a while. My wife tells me all the time that my memory's not so good, but if I recall, I think you had a certain message when you founded Viptela back when. And look, your track record speaks for itself. Your Atif's accomplishments, and I'm sure the doors that will open goes without saying. But you founded Viptela, and by any objective measure, founding the company in 2012, selling it, correct me if I'm wrong, in 2017, so 5 years later, having pioneered and strongly established what we now call the SD-WAN market, by any objective measure, $610 million for what started out, germinated as an idea in your head 5 years before. That is a phenomenal, phenomenal outcome for you and your investors. That said, you ended up selling, and you sold to Cisco. You didn't stay the course. Viptela, as a standalone entity, didn't push through and, become the Cisco of SD-WAN and something more than just that. And that's not a criticism. It's, far better than I, just how hard all the challenges, all the pitfalls, how many things have to go right, how many things can go wrong, things that you can't anticipate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so why is this different? What did you learn from Viptela that you're applying to Alkira? Have you built Alkira for the long haul? Why should one believe that, notwithstanding your great vision and the early execution, that you won't encounter the same challenges that Viptela encountered and ultimately decide that a Cisco, VMware, and HP, whoever, HP is better equipped to push this forward?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, Paul. When we were building Viptela, we were focused on one part of the networking industry, which was the wide area network. And I think at that time, the opportunity that we see with the cloud was just not as visible as it is now. And what it allows you to do, as I tried to explain earlier, is that it allows us to completely transform the market. Now, the way we look at it, if you are into offering solutions in a traditional manner, you will not be able to meet the requirements of the customers going forward, which are growing very, very quickly, right? And because of how quickly you can offer solutions in the cloud, that whole dynamic is changing. Now, the industry will end up splitting into 2 major areas. One is what I call the simple plumbing, like electricity or, a utility, where a network, cable will come, or through wireless, it'll come into your environment, and 5G will also change that landscape quite a bit. So you'll have simple connectivity at the physical level, right, where you have the basic switching and routing capabilities available. And I think with the advent of the cloud, all the intelligence is going to reside in the software. And you're not only seeing that trend in the networking industry, but in all industries. And you're starting to see how the business models need to shift, how the dollars are going to shift. And if you do not continue to adapt to the situation or the new requirements from the customers, you're going to be left behind. Whether it's the equipment manufacturers or the service providers, who, still try to protect what they have and not adapt to the new solutions, because the opportunity is enormous. And we know that traditional businesses are not going to grow that much in the networking industry. So we need to adapt to the new environment and create new dollars and shift some of the dollars around to be able to continue to create excitement in this industry. And that's what Alkira is doing. We are building a very disruptive, very transformative solution which adds significantly to the computer networking industry from the dollars perspective, thereby splitting the market into the physical infrastructure and completely end-to-end virtualization. Now, we have seen the proof of virtualization into different parts of the market, but we haven't seen that end-to-end. And cloud was the first opportunity for us to virtualize. That's what we have done, and we plan to expand much beyond that, with our offering. Atif, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah. So at Alkira, we have taken a very holistic approach to the architecture, and it's not just about connectivity. We've been only around for 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years. So we started working on the architecture, which is not just connectivity, but the first initial use cases are around connectivity because obviously we are a startup, so we have to be focused from the execution perspective. But from the vision perspective, we are looking at the architecture which allows enterprises to use a solution which goes closer to the user, and it also goes deeper into the cloud with services integrated into it. So we built in security, visibility, governance, and whatnot. So it's an end-to-end vision where you can have, or which allows connectivity from any endpoint to any endpoint through services. Visibility and governance.
Atif, I don't know if you can adjust your connection, but some of that got garbled, but I think we got most of it. I want to ask you all, it's a perfect segue to talking about the addressable market opportunity. And this has come up throughout the conversation, including Amir's your response. Have you all sized or have you seen industry estimates of the size of the total addressable market opportunity? And how do you define the opportunity? And far be it from me to ask one question at a time, but on a serious note, is this, what you've described, is this incremental to the existing addressable market for networking and security solutions, or is it going to displace and cannibalize those opportunities, as well as co-location facilities like Equinix and Megaport? To what extent do you augment the market? To what extent do you take away from it?
Yeah. So it's both, Paul, and if I may give you some examples, we are working with some of the largest service providers across the globe, and they see it as a great opportunity to expand their addressable market, or the total addressable dollars that they can get from the customers, because they want to be cloud relevant, right? And they're offering private connectivity services and some services which are not as automated. So this allows them, one, to offer, more relevant higher layer services. The second piece is that it allows them to globalize their offering wherever they don't have presence, because we can instantly extend their reach into those regions. They're extremely excited about that. And also, it allows them to take away some of the business from other, players in the industry who are just providing physical infrastructure and not providing virtual infrastructure. So those dollars will shift, obviously, and there's an opportunity to not only make new dollars, but take some dollars from the existing players in certain areas, as you described, right? So, so how do we see this going forward? The example that I would like to give you is that let's look at just the cloud piece. And the cloud piece, if you attribute 5 to 10% of the dollars spent in expanding your data centers and applications into the cloud to the computer networking industry, then that by itself is an enormous amount, right? And once you start expanding beyond that, you also have some dollars shifting from existing players like colo providers and the last mile. I wouldn't say last mile, but the mid mile players who are offering services which are virtualized, point to point connections, etc. And beyond that, some dollars will come from existing markets as well in the future. So our initial focus is obviously clouds, multi-cloud environment, which is seamlessly connected to your existing infrastructure on-prem. But as we start to expand our offering in the future, we will start to address more dollars in the existing market as well. So I would say it's both new dollars, which are significantly larger than what we have seen in the past, but also we will be addressing some of the existing markets and taking some dollars away from that.
So Amir, a couple questions here. One, you still need a device, whether one calls it a switch, a router, a firewall. One still needs underlying hardware, right? You need,
yes,
in order to pass packets from point A to point B. And you don't provide the underlying hardware. You're a cloud, right? And as you said, you don't provide hardware or software. But, question here, to what extent, you're talking about, understandably, your vision, it's cannibalistic to an extent, and maybe a meaningful extent over time with certain product markets and certain non-product markets, such as COLA, as you were discussing. But if I think about underlying hardware, switching, routing, do you cannibalize Cisco and Juniper and the rest of those markets? And in addition, you currently have partnerships with Palo Alto and Juniper. And the concept of co-opetition, both partnering and competing, that is not unknown. That's been around for quite some time. And so you would not be the first. But you partner with Palo Alto, and yet, I think as part of your vision, as you've articulated it, the ability to provide security, cloud-based security, no different or perhaps maybe better than Zscaler, but conceptually similarly. What do you need Palo Alto for, or any other firewall or security vendor? You can do that yourself. Am I understanding this correctly, that you are, in fact, on the one hand, you're partnering with Palo Alto and Juniper? No doubt you'll partner with many others. Those are just the first two. But you'll partner with many others to the extent they're willing to partner with you, but ultimately you're competing against all these folks as well?
Yeah. So one correction, Paul, we are just partnering with Palo Alto so far. And
my part.
Second piece, yeah. So the thing is that if you look at the overall market, it's taking a very piecemeal approach. It's not a fully integrated end-to-end approach that we have taken so far. So people have done really well offering specialized services in each one of the areas. So thereby, if you look at the mid-mile providers, they will allow you to automatically or, as a service, provide layer 2 capability, point-to-point connections, but you still have to build your network infrastructure yourself, right? And they're starting to offer some virtualized routing capabilities, etc. You look at the security providers, they are providing only security services, which you have to traverse through to come into either the cloud or the on-prem environments. You look at the access providers, they do the similar thing, very specialized, very niche solution, right? Nobody has taken a step back and provided a very comprehensive end-to-end solution, right? So thereby we came up with not only the connectivity piece, which is an underlying infrastructure which is fully meshed and routed and segmented with full policy-based infrastructure built in, but also it allows you to integrate your higher layer services, right? So with Palo Alto, the opportunity is that their VM series products, they integrate so well with the Alkira solution that a majority of our customers are deploying that across the globe, and we allow them to scale up and down. So we have brought elasticity, availability, full, lifecycle management of those products, and thereby that type of partnership is extremely important for both companies, for us as well as Palo Alto. Now, having said that, we understand how difficult it is to integrate the third-party solutions into a new environment. And we've had experience in building products over the last 30 years, and relying on third-party manufacturers to, grow your solution is never the best idea. But what we have done is created such standardized mechanisms to bring in, solutions based on, their existing offerings rather than heavily relying on, modification of that, their solutions or their offerings to bring that into our solution. That's where we differentiate ourselves. There's a lot of intellectual property built into how easily we can bring in new services and new offerings into our solution. Otherwise, it would take a long time to integrate even a single provider's offering, right? So to us, it doesn't matter whether it's an offering from an existing manufacturer of the physical virtual infrastructure, or it is the new offerings from cloud providers. We can seamlessly integrate those services into our solution, and that's how innovative our solution is, going forward. So I hear you, but I think that's why these types of comprehensive end-to-end solutions, not many companies have the strength or the knowledge or the experience to take them on. And that's where very proud to say that our team outshines many other teams in the industry.
Understood and fair point. I don't know if you all can spare an additional 5 minutes, but let me see if anyone from the audience, if you can stay with us for another 5 minutes, has any questions, and then I'll wrap it up with one last question if that works for you all. Amir, Atif, is that okay? If we go 5 minutes over?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, certainly.
All right. Stephen, can you poll the audience to see if there are any questions out there?
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by 1 on your touch tone keypad. If for any reason you would like to remove that question, please press star followed by 2. Again, to ask a question, press star 1. As a reminder, if you're using a speakerphone, please remember to pick up your handset before asking your question. We'll pause it briefly to allow questions to generate in queue. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, to ask a question, press star 1. There are currently no questions waiting at this time.
All right, as I suspected, let me ask you one last question, and then I'll give you an opportunity to sum up. Alkira is a cloud-based approach, as you all have made abundantly clear. The talent pioneered SD-WAN, but the solution was not divorced from hardware, but rather, at least initially, was very much hardware-based, as I recall. What's your take on disaggregated networking solutions in general? I've often remarked that disaggregation introduces complexity, which in turn introduces cost, time, and effort, in addition to perhaps impaired performance. And that complexity is inherent to networking, or at least to large networks, which by definition require the ability to scale not just vertically, but also horizontally in order to interconnect applications, devices, and people over distance. And that is true for most networking product markets, whether data center switching, WAN routing, wireless WAN, optical, etc. As I mentioned before, there's a reason why Amazon and Google, 9 years after the Big Bang events in 2012 for both SDN and NOV, still account for the overwhelming bulk of SDN deployments, which is to say, it takes significant depth and breadth of organizational capabilities to address the introduced complexity. And it's very intriguing to me. You have a cloud-based approach. You have this holistic offering, as you were just making clear, Amir, as opposed to these more discrete solutions. And it's a very unique approach to a very unique, important problem. But let me ask you to address that general issue in terms of disaggregation challenges, and once again to revisit how you're different.
Yeah. I think it was Steve Jobs who said that, it's very difficult to take an engineering problem and simplify it, from the user perspective. And there are very few teams in the industry who are capable of doing that. And it's interestingly, the approach that we have taken, I totally agree with you, Paul, that disaggregation is not an easy problem. You can easily mess that up, right? And especially if you're taking your existing solutions, right, and trying to force fit them into a new environment. That's where the challenge resides. And I think that's what we have observed as an industry, that the solutions which have failed from that perspective are mostly incremental, offerings on top of the existing offerings. The examples that I like to give are trying to force fit the Tesla technology into an existing car, right? Unless you design the car from ground up, you're not going to get there. Or if you're going from railroad or, road type deployments to an airplane industry, which is a completely new way of doing things. You cannot just put, wings on the car and try to make it fly, right? And some of the analogies that I like to use, and that's what you're seeing. What we are doing is building completely disruptive, transformative technology, which is very holistic approach to solving the problem end to end. And it comprises of our own nodes sitting in the clouds, our own infrastructure built in the cloud for the cloud. And it offers solutions, the likes of which have not been seen in the past. And that's the excitement of being a startup, that we get an opportunity to take a step back and clearly define the boundaries which are in our own control. If you were to take existing solutions and try to force fit them to achieve this, it's just not humanly possible, right? And that's the approach that we have taken. We took a clean sheet of paper. We collected the requirements from customers and our service provider partners, and we worked, day and night to build this architecture that we have built, which is completely elastic and scalable, and highly available. And customers love it, and you can see that in the excitement that the customers are putting out these blogs and talking with how much excitement they are talking about it. Literally, I've never seen customers this excited in the past in the networking industry over the last many, many years. I would say since the early days in the late 80s and 90s, right? And it's the same level of excitement that I see in the customers today.
Atif, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Amir has covered it well. I agree with him.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that was a great summary and a great place to end this. And I want to thank both of you for joining us, and I want to thank all of our clients in the audience today. I hope it's been a good use of your time. I'd certainly be surprised if it wasn't, but any feedback will be welcome. And again, I want to wish everybody, please stay safe and sound, and all good things to all of you out there. Thanks again, Atif. Thanks, Amir.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for inviting us.
Right back at you. Take care.
That concludes the conference call. Enjoy the rest of your day.